Hello there, Flip here, and today, instead of catching criminal content creators, we are going to be taking our sus over to potential fraudulent playable characters. I still need to work on the alliteration, but we are going to be looking at Genshin characters basically and determining whether they are a fraud. Do they deserve a high community status for the people that show them, or do they just not live up to their status? And the character on Fraud Watch today is going to be none other than Haitham, in which we will be looking at his power level, value, synergies, and any issues he has. But before we do that, as always, if at any point during the video you're entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin meta, and I'll try to keep you updated. Now, Haitham. He is a Dendro 5-star sword user whose kit revolves around being an on-field spread damage dealer that wants to maximize the mirrors and the uptime of his mirrors for wider and stronger Dendro attacks. Since he is primarily a spread damage dealer, he uses the Gilded Dream set unless you're doing some funky team where no one is holding Deepwood. So we would just run that on him, I guess. From the last time the Olive Ogre reran to now, not much at all has really changed. Kirara, Baizu, and Kave came out, I guess, but they don't work that well with him regardless, so he's virtually the same unit in the same place he was before. In terms of community perception, a lot of people have dubbed Haitham the only good male DPS, and overall he's rated quite highly, even considered T0 by some people because of his carry potential. But well, how true is that? So let's talk about his power level first to see where he actually stands. In terms of power level, Haitham quite simply is one of the stronger 5-star characters in terms of a DPS as a C0 unit. He can reach quite high thresholds of damage with weapons like Harbinger of Dawn, as being a Dendro unit that primarily does damage through spreading. He doesn't care that much about base attack, and only things like EM, crit, and damage bonus matter, in which Harbinger gives a ton of crit value. The Chlorophyll Champions premier team is a Quick Bloom, which is comprised of Nahida, Yelan, and Kuki or Raiden, but more favorably Kuki for the mitigation. This team is single target oriented, focusing on the hyper blooms triggered by Kuki, while also getting strong quicken uptime for Haitham's spread damage, enabled by Yelan's slower Hydra application and the combination of the Master Emerald and Nahida's Dendra app. In comparison to other heavy single target teams like Double Hydra Hu Tao, Double Hydra Hyper Bloom, Double Hydra Haitham Quick Bloom is most definitely up there, while not also falling off horribly in AoE either. I would honestly go as far as to say, based purely on power level, he's the best 5-star damage dealer we have. But the problem comes in when we talk about value. Account value is always a touchy topic, as it always depends on circumstance, and usually a character with higher strength will also have high pull value, unless there are a lot of external factors limiting them, which you could call an Achilles heel unit. Venti, for example, is one of the strongest characters in the game due to his grouping and AoE damage, being able to completely shut down any enemies that can be sucked up by him. But he's an Achilles heel unit because there's simply not many places you can use his strong traits, therefore giving him low overall pull value. And you would be better off pulling a character with slightly lower strength that can be used more frequently. But in Grassgain's case, it's the most ironic and tragic case of an Achilles unit I've seen. Haitham's only real 2 teams are Quick Bloom and Quicken, and if you want these teams to perform well, then you really want to use Nahida with Haitham on these teams, as she increases their floor and ceiling and makes the team significantly easier to pilot as well, allowing Haitham to run lower ER, giving him a fat EM buff and just having a lot of AoE Dendra application. But the problem is that when you slot Nahida into your Quicken or Quick Bloom teams, you can also very easily just forgo using the Jade Juggernaut. Haitham Quicken teams commonly use Yai for its last slot, but doing this hinders Yai's potential on something like an Aggravate team that synergizes better with her kit and allows her to run a grouper for a massive upgrade in AoE, while not falling off heavily in single target. And then Haitham's Quick Bloom core of Nahida, Kuki, and an offensive Hydra unit is already good enough. All Haitham adds is arguably more damage over the double Hydra variant, but it's not like Hyper Bloom really needed more single target damage in the first place. And if you wanted AoE in your Hyper Bloom teams, you have other ways to augment that, which don't involve pulling a 5-star unit with little value. And you can argue this is the same for all carries, but it really isn't. Even with direct upgrades, so like if you had Keqing and wanted to pull Yai, there's still an okay incentive to, as she would be a direct upgrade and replace your Keqing in an Aggravate team. And for Pyro DPS units like Hu Tao and Yoimiya, you can say Zhangling is the better Pyro DPS, so why pull them? But both Yoimiya and Hu Tao are Bennetless carries, which is something they have over Zhangling, and they are also run independently on 2 different teams, to the reason why you wouldn't pull them, giving you another team. Haitham needs Nahida to shine as a unit, but is also in the same vein almost invalidated by the same character he needs, as the teams you run the Dendro Daddy on are the same teams you run Nahida on, and they work perfectly fine without him. Even the argument for other hyper carries, which is that you can vertically invest in them to make them stronger, doesn't really work for Haitham, because unless you go for Constellation 6 on Haitham, which is an astronomical ask, all you can really do is get a copy of his weapon and pull C2 Nahida. So yes, despite how strong Haitham is, I really don't think it's an exaggeration to say he has almost no pull value for a majority if not all accounts, because you are just better off getting Nahida and then finding other ways to improve your Dendro teams from there. But it isn't all doom and gloom. Let's cover some of Haitham's redeeming qualities. He does a lot of damage. He's a DPS, what the fuck did you expect me to say? On most Hyperbloom/Quick Bloom teams, usually the Electro trigger will outpace all other characters on the team by quite a large margin, but at least in Haitham's case, he not only isn't outpaced, but actually does more than the Electro trigger even in single target. I mean, you could also chalk it down to less blooms being generated due to Quick Bloom's lower seed generation, but I think that discredits the sheer amount of damage Haitham is able to do. With other carries like Zhao, Ito, Eula, Wanderer, etc., they are held back due to the fact that they can only rely on their damage, but for the lean green killing machine over here, he's able to use one of the strongest reactions in the game while also not having his damage neutered in the process. Speaking of processes, the process in which he does his damage is also quite great. Haitham's Dendro application and damage is tied to how many mirrors you can generate, which you can do through your burst skill and A1. Because you have 3 ways to generate mirrors, you can adjust rotations to specific scenarios, based on which one gives you the most value. Hyperbloom teams with a Nahida on-fielder almost always have the same rotation, and all tackle content in the same way. There's no way to diversify your approach a lot to favor a specific matchup. But the Green Giant can use a more extended 3-mirror rotation for bosses with extremely long windows like Magu Kenki, and then for bosses with much tighter windows like the Dorito, you can just choose to front load all of your damage as you won't need to prioritize 3-mirror uptime. There are also just so many tiny tricks with Haitham, like using a hold E plunge over his tappy, as you can trigger a projection attack and get a mirror in the same action, and bursting, swapping to another character and then back to Haitham, so you can get on-field with Haitham with 3 mirrors while not losing much off-field uptime. But, just like there is a normal functioning member of society for every Genshin fan, there is also light in the darkness. Now that we have covered Haitham's strengths, let's talk about his issues. The biggest issue of Haitham, I think, has to just be the fact that he really has no teammates. To understand this, I think I need to elaborate further on the fact that Haitham really only has 2 teams being Quick Bloom and Spread. In Nihilum, Haitham's application isn't that great on top of the fact that he isn't doing that much damage without spreads, or adding any other form of utility, so he's a dead slot there. On Burgeon it's the same case, low to no quicken uptime, meaning his damage gets destroyed, and he just becomes a dead slot because the only reason you use him is for damage, in which he isn't doing much of in that team. And then for Quicken, he only really synergizes with Yai's core, replacing Fischl for Kuki, so he can get some sort of mitigation, and the Onamo unit as it doesn't help Haitham spread, and then obviously the Hyperbloom, but using him as a solo enabler is kind of cope unless you really don't have another option. So yeah, Haitham also really wants to be paired with a second Dendro character for the ER, Dendro Resonance, and just to assist his application for Quick Bloom. And also, because on spread teams you don't really have that big of a pool for teammates as they can mess up the reaction, you kind of just need the second Dendro. So let's look at all the Dendro options, shall we? All the defensive Dendro units do no damage and barely buff or support him. Kole is Kole, DMC is okay, and oh wow, would you look at that Nahida? All Haitham teams are just going to be him with Nahida and Kuki and then another Electro or Hydra unit like Xingqiu or Yalan. And all of his teammates are quite valuable, so if you don't have the facilities to use him, good luck. There is also the fact that, like I pointed out in his positives, Haitham has so many rotation options because of his abilities. However, due to his dogshit burst cost and the egregiously long skill cooldown he has, there is also ample opportunity for you to mess up. Oh, you accidentally charge attack right after pressing your burst? You have lost 4 seconds of mirror uptime, good luck. But besides those 2 things, one of which is just skill issue, Haitham doesn't have that many notable flaws. So let's jump right to the verdict, shall we? So, Mossman is an Achilles heel unit with extremely high strength but relatively low value, as he needs a character to work with that same character almost entirely invalidating him. He does make up for it with the fact that he's able to carry teams with his damage, while also being able to abuse one of the strongest reactions in the game at the same time, which is a trait most other carries wish they could have. However, on the other hand, unlike other carries, he is very restrictive within his team options, and can be quite hard to play even despite the amount of skill expression and ways Haitham is able to tackle combat. So overall, is Haitham a fraud? Sadly, I think I'm going to say he's a fraud. If you spin Haitham's situation on literally any other character, they would be ridiculed. Imagine if Farazan came out and at C6 she actually just made Zhao and Wanderer completely irrelevant, as she enabled Quickswap Kaza and Sucrus or something, and it was better than any Zhao or Wanderer team. Again, this is not to say Haitham is a bad unit, far from that. It is kind of due to the fact that we only have one offensive Dendro support being Nahida, who makes all Haitham's team archetypes good enough to where the muscle bound most man isn't needed. So yes, even though he may be one of the strongest damage dealers we've seen at this time, Haitham is a fraud. That was fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I say while we are probably a week into Haitham's banner. I don't think I have any more witty afterwards this time around, so on that note, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe and comment your thoughts on Haitham, as I would love to hear it and I respond to almost every single comment. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.